Welcome to this session of business buying behavior. We'll try to take a closer look at the business buying behavior and why is it that we would like to investigate the buying behavior. Well, we would like to do that because if we know how people and companies behave, we can actually take advantage of it. That means that we can see here that if we know how companies think, perceive and react, what they see as a CEO, or if they see and hear something as a production manager, we can use that in our marketing and we can use it in developing the strategy for our marketing mix. So we would like to understand what stimulate our customers, and therefore if we know what stimulate them, we can also understand something about how they react and why they react the way they do. Meaning that we look at our little model here called stimuli, organism and response. Now, taking a closer look at this stimuli, organism and response model, let's try to bring in the company. Here you will see that we have the stimuli over here that has an impact on the company, which is illustrated with this little house with a CEO inside, or a production manager, or a worker, or somebody who's working there, some of the employees. And the company as such has a reaction, as we can see here, depending on what kind of input they get and depending on what kind of decision they're going to make. So in business to business, the company is actually the organism. So we have this company, and what kind of reaction is it that we find from those? Well, let's see here at the right. We have the response, which is actually a behavior. We see that the company end up choosing a product, they choose a supplier, they have an order routine specification, very often it's understood as that being a contract, and they would probably also like to build some kind of relationship. Now, looking into what kind of stimuli the company is having, we can see over here that in the SOR model, the company is stimulated by marketing stimuli from us and other companies, and there will also be other stimuli. And these other stimuli is very often known as our macro environmental factors, being the pastel factors, and we can see those here: political, economic, sociocultural, technological, environmental and legal. Let's give a little example. Legal. Companies will be affected by the laws in a certain situation in their environment, that they might not pollute in a specific way. There might be different kinds of restrictions on how to treat employees. There might be different restrictions on what kind of ingredients they can use in their products, etc. So we have these very overall stimuli that we would have to take into account that will have an effect on how the company is here thinking and eventually how they behave. Okay, now we know that the marketing stimuli here, product, price, place, promotion, people, physical evidence and processes, also stimulates companies, and therefore these stimuli need to be taken into account. Also here, let's see that if we have our own products, price, place, promotion, that's our 4 P's. If we sell a service, we'll add those 3 P's here. We can try to stimulate a specific company like this one to get in contact with us or have a very specific behavior. So of course we would like to plan our marketing stimuli, as we find here, in such a way that the company will actually end up getting in contact with us and buy our product. Now, what happens then inside the company? What is it that transforms stimuli into a response? Well, let's replace the company with this little square here, and let's see. We have what we call major internal factors that will influence the response, and we have a process that the company, meaning the people inside the company, go through in order to have a specific behavior. Now, As some of those major internal factors, we will find that we have the organization's objectives, policies, procedures, structures, and systems. They certainly have an influence on the way the company is having their buying process. Furthermore, we have the interpersonal relations, we have interests, authority, status, empathy, persuasiveness, that also have an influence on the buying process, and thereby in the end a reaction that is specific for that particular company. And of course the different employees, individual age, income, education, job position, culture, personality, risk, attitude, etc., that also have an impact on the way the company is actually performing when they are buying. So these here lead us to the fact that we have to take a closer look at the organizational buying process, where we can start to see at 8 different steps. And these different steps is to say one by one. If we take a look at it, we can see that the first point here is that we will have a problem recognition in a company. For example, a company will have to say, okay, we are out of stock of something, or we try to need some services. But let's try to take a general look at it. First we have a problem recognition. Then we have a need description of the company. We have a product specification. We have a supplier search when we have specified the product. Having searched for the suppliers, we would probably like to have some offers from them, so we have proposal solicitation. And we select a supplier. We set out an order routine specification, meaning also we would probably make up a contract, and then eventually we will make a performance review. So this process in itself will then lead us to having this response, meaning that based on these steps that we will follow down here, it all leads up to the company ending up choosing a specific product, selecting a supplier, setting out a contract, and probably also building up a certain kind of relationship. Can be a bow tie or whatever it might be here. So here we actually have the model that we start out with stimuli, marketing, and macro-environmental stimuli. We have those influencing the company, both the organization, the interpersonal relationships in the company, the individuals inside, and therefore we also have the stimuli affecting how we define problems, how we describe needs, etc. And all of this in the end leads to a response. So we have the stimuli, we have the organism, which is the company, and we have a response from that company. Now we need to add the buying center and the buying situation. So the buying center, well, the buying center is a group of people, because often in companies we have several people who participate in the actual buying, and that's because there might be different kinds of situations that we are also going to handle, and therefore we will find that the buying situation is also quite important to take a closer look at, because there's simply a difference between buying, let's see here, a new factory and toilet paper for a company who's actually in process. So the buying center, who are these people? Well, it depends on what we are buying. And looking back, are we buying a new factory or are we buying toilet paper? Well, if we buy a new factory right here, I think it's quite obvious that we will find lots of people being involved in that buying, and therefore we will find that we have lots of different people that we have to address if we are the suppliers of a new factory. On the other hand, if we are buying toilet paper, there might not be that many people who's actually participating, maybe only one, and maybe even it's automated, so we just have a system where we automatically get a response from the company when they're out of stock. So the buying center, we would characterize those as having different kinds of roles, these people. Some guys might be called initiators, some might be the users, it could be influencers, deciders, approvers, buyers, and gatekeepers. They all have different, you could say, roles in the company and in the process. And also the same person could have several of these. So we might find that both the initiator and the user are the same. It could be a person who's working at the factory floor, and that person could initiate the company going to buy a new machinery. And therefore that could be the user who's also the initiator, and also maybe the influencer. So depending on the product, depending on the situation, and so we will find that the buying center consists of different kinds of people, and we would have to identify those people in the company. So let's add this buying center to our overall model. You'll see it down here. The buying center is actually adding new perspectives to our organism here, and therefore the buying process and the outcome of that buying process. So the buying situation, as we saw before, we could have something, or we could have a situation where we would like to buy some toilet paper or a new factory. Well, what are some of the differences in buying toilet paper and a new factory? Well, first of all, a new factory, is that strategically important? Yes, we will say it would be. What about toilet paper? No, not strategically important. So there's a clear difference here in the importance strategically. What about the risk of buying? Yes, it's also quite obvious that there's a difference between buying toilet paper and new factory regarding risk. Okay, what about the size of the investment? Yes, there's also quite a different approach here. New factory, lots of money. Toilet paper, not a lot of money. And then what about the interaction with suppliers? Yes, buying a new factory would involve lots of people, lots of interaction. Toilet paper may not even require more than a minimum of interaction with suppliers. Therefore, we have 4 different issues we take a look at here. We have strategically important to the company, the risk of the buying, the size of the investment, and the interaction with suppliers. Now, if we say that if we are high on these 4 here, if it is of a high strategically importance to us, if there's a high risk, if there's a high investment, if there's a high investment or interaction with suppliers, then we will probably see that we have many people in the buying center, and we will see that these people are going through lots of steps in order to make the right decision. And that is pretty normal, and therefore we have a new task situation when we buy a new factory, and we will have 8 steps, and these 8 steps are found in our original model, namely the buying process. On the other hand, if we are quite low on these 4 here, we would probably see very few people, and they would go through few steps, and therefore we will find ourselves in a straight rebuy situation when we are buying toilet paper. So we have identified 2 buying situations, straight rebuy and new task, but there are actually 3. First, the straight rebuy, the new factory, and then we have what we call the modified rebuy. Now, the modified rebuy is kind of in between, so it pays off to start out understanding whether we are having a new task, modified rebuy, or straight rebuy situation when we would like to investigate what kind of response can we get from our customers. So therefore, it leads to various use of the organizational buying process. And that means that if it is a new task situation, like buying a new factory, we then would understand that the company that we're trying to sell our factory to would go through 8 steps. And we find them here. as you can see, we're back to our model. If we have what we call a new task situation, we'll go through all of these steps again. But what if we have modified or straight rebuy? Well, if we have modified or straight rebuy, we would only have a more limited amount of steps that we would go through. We would probably always have problem recognition, maybe also a little need description, but we may not always need to specify our product. So, what about this modified and straight rebuy? Here is an overview. As you can see over here, we have the process, we have the steps 1, 2, down to the performance review. And we have here suggestions for if it is a new task. Yes, we would go through problem recognition. Yes, we would go into need description. Yes, we would go into product specification, and so forth. As you can see, we have yes to all the steps. What if we have a straight rebuy? Let's go over to look at the straight rebuy situation. Yes, we would have a problem recognition. No, not necessarily a need description, but yes, we will specify the product. Even though it's toilet paper, we will specify it. Would we search for suppliers when we have a straight rebuy? No, probably not. Would we look for proposal solicitations? No, probably not. Would we select suppliers? No, we have already chosen. We might have suppliers that has actually been in our supplier or have supplied us for lots of years. Would we make up a contract or make an order routine specification? No, probably not. We have made that maybe for 1 year together with the suppliers previously. But we would probably always have a performance review. And of course, the modified rebuy, we have some maybes and we have some yeses. So, depending on the buying situation, we go through all or some of these 8 steps. So let's take a look at new task. We have here, yes, we would recognize the problem. For example, one way that a company could recognize a problem could be that they have an increase in demand. Okay, what would then happen? Well, if they are going to honor that demand, they would actually say that we have to be able to produce 2,000 units per day. Okay, what does that mean? Well, we have to specify the product. That could be a machinery that would fit into, that would live up to, that would have a certain quality, etc. So we would specify. Then we would go to maybe fairs. We would spend or use existing knowledge on suppliers. We would use consultants. We could advertise. There are lots of ways in which we could search for suppliers. Having found those, we would actually select from those proposals that they come up with, and therefore we would select based on criteria that we have set up. Then we would make the contract, and we would try to figure out whether they are actually doing what they are supposed to do. And then we will of course see that when we have the next here, that in modified rebuy we would only go through some of these, and as well with the straight rebuy only some of these. So now I suggest that you try to go through the process for modified rebuy and straight rebuy. Try to find some examples yourself. And let us include the buying center and the response to our little model here. As we can see, the buying center, we have different people, initiators, users, influencers, deciders, approvers, buyers, and gatekeepers. We looked at that before, but letting these arrows here indicate that the initiator might be part of the problem recognition, be part of the need description, and product description and specification. But the initiator may not participate in these other steps. And then looking at the deciders, They may not be part of the problem recognition or need description, but they might be part of proposal solicitation, supplier selection, order routine specification, and performance review. So the point is that you need to identify the buying center. You need to identify the different people who's having these different roles as initiators, users, influencers, etc. in order to figure out in which steps do these guys participate throughout the buying process. And therefore, how can you have an impact and influence these different people in the buying center in order to do what it takes for those guys to end up making a decision to have a response on choosing your product, meaning selecting you as a supplier, making a contract with you, and build a relationship with you. And that is quite the essence of why do we do an analysis of buying behavior. Well, we would like to understand the response, and in order to understand the response and be able to influence it, we need to take a closer look at the buying process and how companies think. So, therefore, when we are looking at buying behavior, we have to take a closer look at what we saw at the start. What is stimulating the company? What is the company's organism? How does it handle the situation? What kind of people do it involve, the buying center? And what is the response in the end? And this ends the description of the business-to-business buying behavior.